Welcome to episode 363 of FBI Case File Review with Jerry Williams. I'm a retired agent on a mission to show you who the FBI is and what the FBI does through my books, my blog, and my podcast case reviews with former colleagues. Today, we get to speak to retired agent Tony Mozingo, who served in the FBI for 24 years. In this episode, he reviews his investigation and fugitive hunt for Craig T. McFarland, a developer who defrauded banks of nearly $20 million in the late 1970s and 1980s. The extensive manhunt spanned over multiple countries. The breakthrough came when a former associate of McFarland revealed McFarland had used his identity to obtain a passport. Tony arranged for McFarland to be arrested in Monaco. During his FBI career, Tony Mozingo investigated high-profile counterintelligence cases in Washington, D.C. and San Francisco, following earlier assignments in Buffalo, New York and Boston, Massachusetts. Tony spent his last decade in the Bureau leading the Monterey Resident Agency in California. From tackling murder for hire to probing bank fraud and Soviet counterintelligence, Tony's contribution to safeguarding America from domestic and international threats highlight a life devoted to patriotism and service. Tony Mozingo is the author of Beyond the Badge, One Man, Two Lives, to be published on September 12, 2025. The book draws on his profound connection with animals, informing his unique perspective on what it is to be an honorable man, a philosophical thinker, and a proud American. To learn more about Tony Mozingo, visit his website, The Mozingo Zone, and follow him on Instagram at The Mozingo Zone. Before we get to the case review, I want to let Reader Team members know that I'll be sending you my August monthly email on Friday, August the 1st. In this issue, I talk about renaming the podcast from FBI Retired Case File Review to just FBI Case File Review and share audience, gender, and age statistics across several platforms. And I'll review a TV show for teachable moments about fugitives and FBI retirement. In your podcast app's description of this episode, there's a link to the show notes at jerrywilliams.com. You'll also find links to where you can buy me a cup of coffee, join my reader team about crime fiction and the FBI and books, TV, and movies, and learn more about me and my books. Thank you for your support. Now here's the show. I want to welcome my guest, retired agent Tony Mozingo. Hey, Tony, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, nice to talk to you too. I was introduced to you because you have a new book that's coming out, Beyond the Badge. What's the subtitle?
The subtitle is One Man, Two Lives.
Yeah, and I have seen you all over Instagram with your fun facts about the FBI, your life on Instagram Reels. It's a lot of fun. We're going to talk about Beyond the Badge and your new role as social media star at the very end of the episode. But for now, we're going to concentrate on one of the cases that you wrote about in your book, Beyond the Badge, which is a memoir. It covers your entire life and what led you to your career in the FBI and what you're doing today.
And it's more than a memoir because I provide a lot of information about my interest in philosophy and reading. And the stars of the book are all of the cats and a couple of dogs that I've shared my life with.
Excellent. But right now, we're going to give everybody a little taste of what they can expect in the book when it comes to your FBI, as we like to say, war stories. Why don't we start out with one of the cases that you work? And I know we were talking a little bit ahead of time. You spent a third of your career working foreign counterintelligence cases, a third of your career working white-collar crime cases, and a third of your career in management. Is that right?
That's a good example. Yeah, that's exactly what.
Everybody knows I worked white-collar crime during my career, so I'm very biased and I love the fraud cases. So today, you have agreed to share one of the chapters out of your book, Beyond the Badge, about a fraud case. This fraud case reminded you of a very popular movie.
Yes, it reminded me so much of it that I used the name of the movie for the title of my chapter. It's called Catch Me If You Can. It was a Leonardo DiCaprio movie.
Tell us more about the case and the subject.
The subject, his name is Craig T. McFarland. He was a businessman in Carmel, San Jose area, respected businessman, very successful businessman. He was flamboyant and he kind of bordered on being eccentric as well. In the time that we're talking about in the 1980s and on into the early 90s, he was very prosperous. He was known for his quality projects that he worked. He was considered so reliable that regional banks were willing to offer him unsecured loans, which turned out for them not to be a good idea. Back in my days in Virginia, we would have said he had the world by the tail on a downhill drag. Despite this reputation, it all came tumbling down when it turned out he defrauded 5 banks, a total of nearly $20 million, which in today's dollars, it would have probably been worth around $50 million. It was not an insignificant case.
He was asking banks for loans. What was he using the money for?
Until he became a crook. He was using the money as anybody else would do, investing and building property. And he was upfront and reliable and effective until he was not.
So he was a developer? Was he actually developing buildings and shopping centers?
Oh, yeah, all of that, especially in the Monterey Carmel area.
All right. So everybody knew him and they considered him to be a prosperous guy.
Yep.
And what was going on at the time? Was there a strong economy? What was happening?
It was happening in the late 80s and early 90s. And yes, the economy in those days was very strong. People with money were taking chances and making investments, and they're doing very well.
What was your relationship to the case? Were you assigned to Monterey at the time?
Yes, I was working in a Monterey resident agency and with just one partner. We usually broke it up into the white collar and the non-reactive stuff. My working partner, his name is Rick Lack. He handled the reactive criminal work. Whenever we just needed help in doing our job, we always worked together.
How did you learn about this case? Something from the U.S. Attorney's Office or one of his victims?
Came down from the desk that I worked for out of San Jose, just a case assignment. Once I got the case assigned to me, I took off, started interviewing people like you normally do.
And what did you first learn about Mr. McFarland as far as the banks that he defrauded? Did you have all of that information immediately?
Not immediately, but we worked our way through it until we finally came up with about 5 banks. And based on the referrals that we got from the Federal Deposit Insurance Company, the total came out to be, in those days, about $20 million.
How was he able to get away with this?
He got away with it because he had several years of being a reputable businessman. I guess that something snapped. I think the thing that snapped was a girlfriend that we'll talk about later.
But didn't he have like accountants working for him? If he was this huge businessman, he certainly wasn't running it on his own.
No, this is really interesting part of his scheme. He had developed relationships with 2 very prominent accountants, one in San Jose, California, and another 75 miles away south in the Monterey Carmel area. Each of the accountants prepared IRS tax forms for him to report each year. But each accountant got different information. One of the accountants got all the good news about how prosperous he was, and he used that information from them to justify some of the loans that he got. The other accountant got all the bad news. Wherever he lost money or things were negative, it went to that accountant. The accountant that got the bad news, usually, although both of them had created tax returns for him, the one who got the bad news sent it into the IRS.
Well, at least that was smart of McFarland. He didn't try to pull this over on the IRS, just on the victim banks.
Yeah, like I say, he was effective until he was not.
And how long did all of this last?
Oh, gosh, until about 1991 or so. That's when it started to come unraveled. It seemed to work up until then, but as the old saying goes, you can't fool all the people all of the time.
That's true. That's true. So I take it a lot of it had to do with the fact that he had taken out these loans and he wasn't paying them back. What was he doing with the money?
He must have been stashing it until about 1991 when it looked like that the scheme might be exposed. I'm not certain how that happened. I think it could have happened through some work that the IRS was doing. But his reaction was to divorce his wife, paying her upfront child support, and then he just disappeared from the area with his girlfriend.
When we ask the question, what was he doing with the money? There's usually a girlfriend or a mistress on the side.
Oh, yeah, a girlfriend was involved.
Before we talk about his disappearance and his fugitive status, tell me a little bit more about his living status. Was he living large? Did he have the mansion and all the luxury vehicles on the outside? Did he look prosperous?
Oh, yeah, very much so. He was very prosperous. He had a number of different properties. One of his favorite ways of spending his money was on classic cars. In one of his buildings, he created a garage where he kept all of his classic cars. Every year in Carmel, Monterey area, we have an auto show, and he was always willing to drive those cars in those shows. That was one of his pet projects.
Okay. We're not sure exactly how he got caught, but when the heat was on, he and the girlfriend took off. So where'd they go?
The only way we knew where they went was when they would call in to their friends and tell us. They traveled extensively in Latin America and in Europe. They went places where he could probably stash his money securely, places like the Bahamas and the Channel Islands. But we didn't know where he was until he would call in and talk to one of his friends, and we could pick it up from them.
It sounded like he was on a world globe trotting tour.
He was indeed. Yep.
Once the banks found out about this, did they immediately call the FBI and report this?
No, not an immediate call. Most of the large banks prefer to investigate their loan losses on their own and to settle them in civil court if possible. But if it's cases like this where there was just too much money and gone too long and didn't look like their private investigator was going to be able to help them, that's when the banks then admit that there was a loss and they send the information of the loss to the FBI for investigation by way of the Federal Deposit Insurance Company.
And I take it that's when you enter the scene, stage right.
That's exactly right.
This is interesting. What do you do first?
Well, first of all, we knew they were overseas, but we didn't know where they were. But what we did know is that every now and then they would call in to friends or to some contacts they had in a local media, a local newspaper. When they heard that the FBI was looking for them, they began to taunt us by means of their friends or by means of the newspapers. They would say, the great FBI, they're looking for us, but they'll never get us.
I'm sure when you hear that, that's like a motivator for you, right?
That's an understatement to say that, yeah.
All right. So when you get the case, you don't know anything about him. So what are some of the things that you did? Of course, you're going to be looking at those bank records. You've also got like a fugitive case on your hands.
It's very much like a fugitive case. And unfortunately, other than a photograph of the two people we were looking for, we really didn't have much more to go on other than that. But I did get my first break through a routine inquiry on his background information. In one of his earliest jobs as a young man, he had been employed at the post office department. When I learned that, that suggested to me that he was probably fingerprinted. I hadn't had a reason before that, but at that point I checked with the FBI fingerprint files, and indeed there they were. But not really knowing what I was going to do with them at that time, I asked them to send me a number of 8x11 photographic copies of these fingerprints. When I got them, I dictated a review of the story up to that date. Along with the story, I attached a copy of the fingerprints, and I sent them to all of the legal attachés that we maintain around the world, especially in Latin America and Europe, where he was traveling mostly, to have them have it on hand in the event that we were able to locate him and have an opportunity to arrest him. We really needed to know how to prove his identity.
Did you know for sure that he wasn't using his own name?
That's another problem we had. Other than using it when he called in to taunt us, we didn't know the name he was using. And that took a while before we were able to make some progress there. Several months into the case, we did get a break. Back in the days when McFarland was working, he worked with a number of contractors around the Monterey Carmel area. And at one point, one of these contractors found himself in a bit of a pickle with the law, thinking that maybe the FBI could put in a good word for him. He told us that in the past, before this whole thing started, McFarland had asked him if he could buy all of his identification papers. The source told us that, yeah, he did. He had sold him his driver's license, his identification papers, anything that he would need to have a new personality. McFarland had shared with him that he was going to obtain a passport with a new name. So that gave us the next lead. We had to contact the passport department back in Washington, D.C., and indeed, yeah, they confirmed that a passport had recently been issued in that name, but issued in Maui, Hawaii. Clearly, Hawaii was on one of their favorite places to go. Now we know the name that they might be traveling under, and that really gave us something to work with.
It can't be easy just to take over somebody's identification. Did McFarland look like this other guy?
Yeah, there was enough of a similarity in their physical descriptions that they could pull it off.
Okay. Because I was wondering, you just can't assume somebody's identification. I take it he had like the birth certificate and all of that stuff?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Bear in mind, he was going to use these things and way out of the country, in Latin America and Europe and other places where there wasn't anybody to compare it to.
Did you get to go to Maui?
Not then, no. Later in my life I did, but not then.
You didn't get to go on the FBI's dime.
No.
All right. So what did you do? Because now you know that he at least was in Maui at some point because this passport was issued in the state of Hawaii.
At this point, I'm sure most listeners know this, but the FBI maintains legal attaches in the United States embassies all across the world. Legat, we call them legats. In this case, not knowing where he was, but knowing that if we did know where he was, we could identify him, I dictated a summary memorandum of all the events up to that date and attached the fingerprints. And I sent a copy of my text and the fingerprints to every legal attaché around the world, especially Latin America and Europe, kinds of places where he might be found. So if we did get a break where he might be, we would have the fingerprints and the documents there available to be disseminated to local law enforcement.
I guess he could just go to one of these countries and just lay low. So you were thinking maybe he would do something that would bring him to the attention of foreign authorities.
Based on him, his personality, we really didn't think he was going to become a lawbreaker while he was traveling outside the U.S. But in the course of developing the case, there were several people that we had interviewed him who worked with him in the past or known him in the past or friends with him. Finally, I was able to make some progress with one of the friends. This friend decided that he would help the FBI because he occasionally had contact with McFarland. McFarland often liked to call in to his friends and neighbors in his taunting of us, and this guy was on that list. But he agreed to work with us. At this point, we were able to have a good chance of finding out where he might be.
All right. I had to ask you because you mentioned a couple of times that he was taunting you, mocking you. What would he say, and how did that make you feel?
Well, it didn't make me feel good. No, he would just say, "Oh, the great FBI is coming looking after me." And then they think they're so hot, but they'll never catch me. He didn't use my name, but he just said FBI.
Did he know that you were assigned the case?
No, I don't think he did.
It was a general mocking.
Yep.
But it still made you, I guess, that much more determined to find him and bring him to justice.
Yeah. The Bureau was taking all the heat, not me personally.
So this quote unquote friend of his has agreed to cooperate. What happens next?
Again, like everything in this case, time passes, but really wasn't too long, just a couple of months. We got a call from him, and he said that McFarland had been in touch with him on a phone call and that he was traveling in Europe. And he shared with him that he was on his way to Monaco. He was close enough with this friend to let the friend know that in Monaco, he had a certain hotel he liked to stay at. Immediately, we called the legal attaché in Paris. They contacted the Monaco police, began looking for him, and knowing that at some point or another, he was going to show up there.
Why don't we take some time to explain to those who may not understand how that works? Now, we talked about him being a fugitive. Tell us a little bit more about UFAP. What's the acronym mean? Because, of course, we always have all these acronyms. And how does that help us capture people that now have fled overseas?
UFAP is the acronym we use in the Bureau, a violation of the U.S. Criminal Code called unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. In the Bureau, we just call those fugitive cases. Local authorities, when there's a bank robbery or a criminal activity, a murder or whatever, and find out that the perpetrator travels somewhere in the United States and is avoiding them, they call the Bureau and we will open up a UFAP case. And with the information that we have about each particular circumstance, leads would go out to different divisions and different offices. Me and my partner handled many of these leads in the Monterey Carmel area, and we would go out and make arrests.
So you provide the information that you know about him, about McFarland, to the FBI agent, the legat assigned to Paris. And I think you said that he contacted the Monaco police.
She, in this case, is the female legat. Yes, she did. She sent that down to the police at Monaco, and they were very happy to hear that.
That one happened to be Lauren Anderson.
Oh, that name Lauren sounds familiar to me, yeah.
I've actually interviewed Lauren Anderson about her time as the legat in Paris. What a coincidence.
Yeah, how about that?
What does the Monaco police, what kind of information does she provide to them to help them figure out if this person really is McFarland and to execute the warrant?
Some time ago, a couple of months earlier, she had received my write-up and the fingerprints. She sent copies to Monaco. So they were already there. Yeah, so that was good.
When do they get to lay hands on him, put those handcuffs on? Tell me about what you've learned about that arrest.
What we found out was that using what my source had told us about the day that he might be there and his favorite hotel, the Monaco police went to that hotel. Lo and behold, he had checked in earlier. But as it turns out, after checking in, he and his girlfriend had gone to one of their favorite restaurants, which, as it turns out, the front desk knew. So now the Monaco police deed him out over to the restaurant and confronted McFarland sitting there and having dinner.
You probably ruined his dinner.
Oh, yeah. When they approached him, they said, McFarland, you're under arrest. And he says, no, that's not me. You've got the wrong guy. He says, I don't know what you're talking about. It's not me at all. My name is such and such. They said, no, we think you're McFarland, and we want to take you back to the office right now where we have a set of your fingerprints, and we want to see if you match. And I suspect about that time, a major lump rose in McFarland's throat. They went back to the station, compared the fingerprints, and at that point, they arrested him on the spot. And we had him all this time. That's how long it took.
Wow. Okay, so you didn't get to go to Maui. Did you get to go to Monaco to pick him up and bring him back to the U.S.?
This is where my Asian experience came in. Yeah, I was offered the opportunity to do just that. But when American fugitives are arrested overseas, that's a job for the U.S. Marshals Service. Typically, on a white-collar case, 2 marshals will travel to the location, pick up the fugitive from, in this case, the Monaco police, and they would fly back to the West Coast with him and turn him over to the prosecuting attorney. However, when they travel in the last seat on the coach row of an airplane, the 2 marshals have the suspects sitting between them. I was offered the opportunity to go there and be one of those marshals temporarily. I don't think I was particularly interested in sitting next to a guy that I've been looking for a long time, all the way back to the West Coast of the United States. That would not be my idea of a good time.
And I guess it would probably have been a trip there and a trip right back. No time to do any sightseeing in the Principal of Monaco.
I don't think I would have been down to the casino, no.
Okay. I can see why you said no. Is that it? They arrest him, they bring him back. Oh, wait a minute. What about the money?
This is another fascinating twist in this case. Later, after the arrest, the Monaco police searched his room. And believe it or not, in his room, they found a little black book.
Ooh, a little black book.
Yeah. First notification I got that he had been arrested was a phone call that I got at 4 a.m. in the morning. And I did a little jig and dance in the middle of the night and woke my wife up. So now it's the next night, and we get another call in the middle of the morning from Legat telling us that this little book has been found. And believe it or not, in the book is written in pencil, it says, "Where the money is."
Beautiful.
From a point of view of the United States of America and getting their money back and the banks getting their money back, that was just a miracle because ordinarily it takes so long to try to run down where he might have been and where he might have stashed the money. But now we had it in a list. It saved the U.S. government a fortune in travel time and searching for the money. It was wonderful.
So the money had been stored in bank accounts all around the world? Exactly where did he have it?
Channel Islands, the Cayman Islands, other places, of course, Switzerland, places where you can securely stash money like that and have some degree of keeping it hidden.
And because I've read the book, I've read the chapter, I know that at the end of the case, it didn't really flow the way that you didn't get to have that pat on the back. So tell everyone what happened at the very end of the case.
At that point, I was very ill with a major illness that eventually caused me to retire in 95. I knew that a younger agent had inherited the case. I knew the agent. I knew that he would follow it through the prosecution, which he did. But you might be surprised to hear that I never really inquired about the outcome. And I still don't know to this day what happened to him, although I do know that he had been found guilty. I don't know what his total time served or anything. I had already gained my satisfaction in catching him, knowing that I'd done my job and that the law had been enforced.
You had the fun of the international escapade of chasing him down and finding him. I guess at the end, the sentencing really is out of your control anyway.
Yeah, doing the right thing for its own sake. Stoics like me believe that true happiness and contentment comes from living in accordance with nature, reason, and virtue. Doing the right thing brings tranquility and satisfaction regardless of circumstances.
A case well done.
Thank you.
It had a great outcome, and I really appreciate you sharing that case review with us today. Your book, Beyond the Badge, has case summaries about some of the cases that you worked on. It has understandings about your philosophy and life and how you grew up and the things that you like to do. But one of the things that's real interesting is your love of animals. Why don't we take a little bit of time to talk about the book? What would you like to share? If anybody is thinking, maybe I'll read this guy's book, what can you tell them that will enhance their interest in learning more?
The whole idea of writing this book started with a book of philosophy by Mortimer Adler called Six Great Ideas of Mankind, Philosophical Ideas. Truth, virtue, beauty, liberty, equality, and justice. Those six great ideas. When I read that book, it made quite an impression on me. And as I was reading, I looked around at all the animals that I had lived with and the various, mostly cats over the years, but a very smart border collie. I realized that each one of the personalities of these pets fit one of those six great ideas. So that gave me the idea to sit down and write about that, which I did. I did this in my retirement. In the course of that, I realized that it was all going to be one way. I added a bit of fantasy to the book, and the fantasy was that I learned that I could talk with them. And I learned that they could talk with me, and thus we can discuss all of the nuances of the six great ideas. I thought at this point, knowing what I knew about each one of the animals, there were really funny stories that I could write about not only their personality, but funny stories that their personality reflected.
All right, give us just a little example. They'll have to read the book to get everything, but I'm just trying to get an idea of how you were able to accomplish this goal of weaving in philosophy and your love of your animals. So just give us a little taste of one of those ideas that they conveyed to you.
There was an animal that I called Moses. We called him Moses because he had been lost and discarded. We found him in the bulrushes. That's why we called him Moses. Moses represented what we call goodness, virtue. He never did anything bad. He was just the perfect example of a cat. Whenever we had gotten other kittens, he would take them under his wing and teach them about how to be a cat. What insects to eat and what insects not to eat, and what prey that you can catch and what prey not to catch, and also what the idea of goodness was all about, how they should organize their own lives.
And also in the book was a little bit of a memoir too about your life, because it says one man, two lives.
Mm-hmm.
That's in there too. In the book, do you answer my standard question that I ask to all my guests? And that is when and why you joined the FBI. Can you share that with us?
It was 1970. I was born in 1944, so I grew up in the late 40s and early 50s at a period of time where law enforcement had a very good reputation. On TV, we watched shows like Gunsmoke and what was the one with Jack Webb was in Dragnet, yeah. Gunsmoke, Dragnet. Then, of course, I was always surrounded by returning veterans from World War II. My uncle was in all the fights in the Pacific, including Iwo Jima. My another uncle was in the invasion of the Philippines in the Army. So I just grew up with a great respect for law enforcement and of course, the military along that way. It gave me a great model to even think of that I might even be considered to be an FBI agent.
And why the FBI? Did you know somebody or what?
No, it was just a fluke. I was working for TWA at the time and went over to the FBI headquarters with a friend of mine working there because the FBI agents who work in the laboratory are traveling all the time back and forth to testify. So the airlines are interested in their business. While I was in FBI headquarters with him, I passed by the employment office and just on a fluke, I just picked up an application and I filled it out and sent it in and pretty much forgot about it.
Until you got the call.
Until I got the call, yeah.
All right. So you had a 25-year career with the FBI and then you retired. We're going to talk about what you're doing now. What did you do post-retirement?
Post-retirement, I retired. I was terribly ill with inflammatory arthritis. Post-retirement, it took me another 5 or 6 years to finally get that under control to the point where I could begin living another life. At that point, my father had been a contractor, a carpenter. I had those skills. We would remodel a house and sell it, move on, remodel another house and sell that. That's what I was doing.
And then one day you decided, I'm going to write a book.
Yeah.
And then it morphed into, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to build a platform. So when the book comes out, people will know who I am and be interested in learning more about me. So let's talk a little bit about why you decided to write the book and your new career as a social media star.
Yeah, in writing the book, one of the things that I injected into the stories, besides philosophy and just love of cats and dogs, I had to make it a little bit of fantasy too. And the fantasy is that I was able to talk with them and understood them and they understood me. That's how all the information is exchanged about philosophy and how the animals fit into certain aspects of the six great ideas. I had to invent a way that I spoke with them.
But everybody talks about writing a book. Why did you actually sit down and do it?
At the time, I had moved out to Hawaii, living in Kona in my retirement. Sitting up, looking out over the bay, I was thinking, I think I'll sit down and start writing stories about the animals. Just because I was retired. Didn't have anything to do except write and remember. That's how it started, just for me. I eventually had it professionally edited and cleaned up, gave some thought about maybe trying to have it published. But one thing or another, you're a busy life and you don't really have time to do this. Until later this year with my wife, Donna, she said, you know what? This is so good. People like this. Everybody that I showed it to were happy with it. She said, let's just see what we can do about getting this thing published. We invested into a consultant sitting next to me here, Pamela Donnelly, who happens to know everything I needed to know about getting as far as I've gotten so far.
I take it that one of her suggestions was for you to go on social media. I follow you. It's Mozingo Zone on Instagram.
Yeah.
And enlighten us with your philosophy, stories about your cat, stories about your FBI career. And some of your postings, some of your reels have really done extremely well.
I can chalk that up to my consultant. I can't take any credit for that.
Tell us all about your iconic fedora.
That comes under one of the great ideas. It's called beauty. Hoover understood that the people had to trust the FBI. And not only had to trust the FBI, we had to earn that trust, but we had to look like it too. That's why he said, you're going to dress in a suit with nice shoes, a white shirt, a tie, and a fedora hat. That's what we all looked like as late as 1970 when I started. And of course, others you've probably talked to know that that was the way you looked in those days. The beauty part of it was the way we comported ourselves. The people trusted us. We had to look like an FBI agent, too. One of the things I learned early on in training school from Charlie Donnellan is that we seldom solve cases ourselves. Occasionally we do, but mostly we solve cases because the people work with us and they come to us. They trust us enough to share information with us that leads to our conviction rate. The idea of beauty, which is something that Hoover especially understood very well. We have to look like agents and comport ourselves like agents. I fit right in with that.
I know that philosophy, that idea is part of what intrigued you into becoming an agent. And that's because you had watched different TV shows about law enforcement that had you intrigued about fighting crime. What do you think about the TV shows and the movies like Catch Me If You Can that focus on the FBI and the reality of the real job?
Things are so different now than they were working. In those days, we consider technology when they issued us pagers. That's how far back it goes. Nowadays, the big difference between the crime shows that you see on TV and the way it really was is doing white-collar work, everything was paperwork. And when you subpoena bank records, you get a box full of records. But nowadays, everything's on the computer. The information that we subpoena is on a computer. We work on a computer to type it up and do our work. We communicate with each other by computers. It's so different. It's like night and day. I remember the days when our records department was put on 3x5 cards with a multitude of GS3 clerks. That's how we kept our records. Things changed so much.
Yeah, they certainly have. I try my best. My job, as I do it today with the podcast and the books and the blog, where I do teachable moments. So I always try to keep up to date on what's happening with the FBI. But yeah, all of this computer and digital stuff keeps changing, and you're always having to learn new ways of investigating. But one of the things that you said is so true, that a lot of it has to do with communicating with people and talking to people.
And along those lines, one of the things that you don't often see this in TV shows and in real life, one of the things that was very important, as far as I was concerned, is maintaining a good relationship with local authorities. The local police and highway patrol, they're the guys out there on the front lines. They're the ones who have to pull over a car in the middle of the night. We go to the bank robberies and work with them. But one of the things that's very important for especially young FBI agents to learn is a respect for the people that are also in law enforcement. It's so important to have a good relationship with them, to get to know them personally. That returns whatever time you invest getting to know the local people around in the neighborhood where you work or the type of work you do, or in my case, in the 3 counties Monterey Resident Agency was responsible for. That liaison work that you do with local people is so important. It pays off so well. And I always, whenever I'm maybe training a younger agent, try to make that point with them. These are the guys that are going to help you solve these cases. And in some cases, for me, in working away from the office, when I needed to make an arrest and Rick was on leave, I just got one of the local officers to come with me. And I don't know if that's well enough transmitted to some of the local shows that are on TV these days, but that is very important.
Absolutely. That partnership with local, state, and other federal law enforcement is so important. Tony, this has been great talking with you today. I'm going to catch up with you on Instagram. Is it Mozingo Zone?
Mozingo Zone, yes.
At the end of every episode, I like to give my guests the last word. So what would you like to say? You're a philosopher.
Aristotle wrote about virtue and ethics and emphasized the development of moral character. Doing the right thing for its own sake is a natural way of just cultivating virtue. Stoics like me believe that true happiness and contentment come from living in accordance with nature, and doing the right thing to us brings that tranquility and happiness.
And that's the end of the interview. In your podcast app's description of this episode, there's a direct link to the show notes at jerrywilliams.com, where you'll find photos of retired agent Tony Mozingo, as well as links to a news article about the bank fraud case, and, of course, a link to Tony's book, Beyond the Badge, One Man, Two Lives, to be published on September 12th, 2025. I hope you enjoyed the interview and that you'll share it with your friends, family, and associates. You can show me just how much you liked it by buying me a coffee. There's a link in your podcast app's description of this episode, or you can visit jerrywilliams.com and tap on the little coffee cup icon in the bottom right-hand corner of my website. Don't forget to follow FBI Retired Case File Review on your favorite podcast app. Now, this podcast is all about true crime, but if you're also interested in crime fiction, once a month via my reader team email, I keep you up to date on the FBI and books, TV, and movies. When you join my reader team, you get access to my FBI reading resource, a colorful list of more than 70 books about the FBI written by FBI agents who have been guests on this podcast. There's nonfiction, crime fiction, true crime, and memoirs. You'll also get my FBI reality checklist, where I debunk 20 cliches about the FBI and receive news about what I'm up to and about my FBI nonfiction and crime fiction books. I want to thank you for listening to the very end. I hope you come back for another episode of FBI Retired Case File Review with Jerry Williams. Thank you.